Sometimes, when you read war stories, you begin to notice strange things. Not only the events themselves, but also how soldiers relate to ordinary objects, weapons, equipment, even small things. All of it eventually becomes something more. Some give names to their rifles. Others carry talismans, photographs, letters, pieces of fabric. There are stories where soldiers believed that certain items literally saved their lives. Sometimes it looks like superstition, but when you go through war, the line between the rational and the irrational fades. This is especially true for pilots. Since the days of major wars, they treated their aircraft almost like living beings. They gave them names, painted symbols on the fuselage, left personal marks. Some wrote the names of loved ones, others used humorous nicknames. But behind all of this was something deeper. Every flight could be the last. And when the aircraft brought them back alive, they thanked it as if it had fought alongside them. Over time, such stories began to accumulate.
And if you dig deeper, you can find cases that are already difficult to explain with simple logic. Aircraft that outlived their crews. Aircraft connected with strange events even after the war. Some of them now stand in museums, but there are people who are convinced they are not entirely empty. These are stories passed between soldiers, technicians, and guards. No one likes to talk about them officially, but if you stay at night near such machines, you begin to understand why. One such story happened at a military base not far from the city of Poltava. There is a small aviation museum there where old aircraft that took part in various operations are displayed. During the day, it is an ordinary place, tours, families, children. But at night, everything changes. The silence becomes deeper, the shadows grow longer, and the aircraft themselves look different. I served there a few years ago. After returning from deployment, we were assigned night guard duty near the museum.
The task was simple: to make sure no one climbed on the equipment, especially after holidays. Most of the time, the night passed quietly. We just sat near the entrance or occasionally walked around the area. That night, I was paired with a senior soldier named Ihor. He was preparing for promotion and constantly studying. To pass the time, he asked me to quiz him. But it turned out he had forgotten his notes in the barracks. "I'll run and be back," he said. 15 minutes max. I stayed alone. The night was quiet, with only streetlights casting a yellow glow over the exhibits. To keep myself busy, I decided to walk around. Behind the museum, there was a row of aircraft, different models, different eras. But one immediately stood out. An old transport plane, slightly tilted forward, as if frozen mid-motion. It looked almost alive. I stopped in front of it and just stared. The cockpit was dark, but the fuselage still bore marks of old damage. You could imagine what it had been through. And that's when I felt it.
Like someone was watching me, I turned sharply. No one. An empty yard. Silence. I looked back at the plane and saw a face. It was looking at me from the cockpit window, clear, real. At first I thought Ihor had come back and decided to mess with me, like he had climbed inside and was sitting there. I walked closer. The door of the aircraft was locked. A small metal padlock hung from the handle. "Hey, how did you get in there?" I shouted. No answer. I walked around the wing and stood directly under the cockpit. "Seriously, open up or tell me how you got in," I continued. And then I noticed the light, a faint bluish glow inside, like someone had cracked a Kim light. The face appeared again, but now it was different. The man was wearing an old pilot's helmet. His eyes were wide open, and his expression, it wasn't joking. It was fear, pure, uncontrollable fear. And within a second, it changed. A smile, a natural, sharp, and then everything disappeared. The light went out. The cockpit became completely dark. I stood there for another second, and then just bolted, running toward the entrance.
Right at that moment, I saw Ihor calmly walking toward me. "Why are you running?" he asked. "There's someone in the plane," I blurted out. "I thought it was you." "What? Are you serious? I saw him. He was there." We went back together. I wasn't as sure anymore, but I still pointed at the cockpit. Dark. Empty. The door locked. "So where is he?" Ihor asked. I stayed silent. At that moment, a duty sergeant approached us, an older soldier, experienced. "What's going on here?" he asked. Ihor briefly explained the situation. The sergeant looked at me, then at the plane, and unexpectedly smiled. "You saw him too, didn't you?" he said. "Who?" Ihor asked. "The pilot." There was silence. "I saw the same thing a few years ago," he added calmly. "And not just me." After that, he simply walked away, as if nothing unusual had happened. And that was the first time I thought that some things are better left unexplained. After that night, I tried not to think about what I had seen, but I couldn't fully forget. Every next shift near the museum didn't feel as calm anymore. You start looking at those same planes differently, as if they're just standing there, but at the same time not. And strangely, I wasn't the only one. No one talked about it officially, but among those who had served longer, similar stories had been circulating for years. Some heard footsteps at night. Some said they saw lights inside cockpits, even though the electricity had long been disconnected. And almost everyone knew about that same plane. But the real case that made me think more seriously didn't happen to me. It was Serhij's story. He had been serving in our unit for several years and was considered a completely normal guy. No fantasies, no stories about anything supernatural. He had a small son, Marco, about 3 or 4 years old. Once a year, we held an open day. Families could come, see the equipment, spend time together. For children, it was always a celebration. Sergej came with his son. They walked around, looking at vehicles and planes. The kid was running around, laughing, like all children. Until they approached that same plane. Marco suddenly stopped, froze. Sergej didn't pay attention at first. He thought the boy was just staring. But then he noticed he wasn't even blinking, just staring at one point. "Hey, what's wrong?" he asked. Marco quietly replied, "I was here." "Where here?" "In the plane, a long time ago." Sergej smiled at first. "Come on, it's your first time here." But the boy didn't react. "I was older, and we were flying," he said calmly. "It was dark, very loud, and scary." Sergej stopped smiling. "What do you mean?" "I had a bird patch," Marco said, pointing at his shoulder. "And they were looking for us." Who? Bad people. After that, he suddenly snapped back to being a normal child, running, laughing, pointing at things. And Serhij just stood there. He later said he felt a chill down his spine, because his son couldn't know things like that. He didn't watch war movies, he had never been told anything like it. And it didn't stop. A few weeks later, Marco saw a soldier with a patch and said, "That's mine, but mine was different." Later, in a store, he pointed at an old rifle. "I had one like that in the plane." Serhij started getting nervous. But the worst happened at home. He was playing a military video game Marco was watching. Suddenly, a soldier appeared on the screen. The boy got terrified. He dropped behind the couch and whispered, "They're here. They'll find me." Serhij immediately turned the game off. He said it didn't feel like imagination. It felt like a memory. After that, he stopped bringing his son to the museum. But it didn't end there. Similar things were happening elsewhere. Later, I heard another story, at a different base, in another city. 2 technicians, Ole and Maxim, were working a night shift. They were doing a routine inspection of a large transport aircraft. The night was windy. The plane creaked, metal shifted, creating a very unsettling atmosphere. They split up. Ole stayed outside, Maxim went inside. A few minutes passed, and suddenly, a scream, loud, sharp. Ole ran toward the entrance, but before he could get inside, Maxim came running out, pale, eyes wide, breathing heavily. "There's someone in there," he said. "Who?" "I heard something upstairs, thought it was an animal. And I shined my light and saw him." "Who?" Maxim paused. "A man."
What was he doing? Standing above the grate, staring at me. And his eyes were red. Ole thought he was joking. You serious? He was breathing. I heard it. It wasn't normal. They called security. The aircraft was fully checked. No one. No signs of intrusion. Nothing. After that, Maxime refused to work night shifts. And as others said, he never went inside that aircraft alone again. Over time, these stories started forming a pattern. No one said it out loud, but everyone understood. Some aircraft aren't completely empty.
And if the first two stories could still be explained as coincidence or the human mind, this one was different. It didn't start in a museum or on night duty. It started with a real discovery. Many years after the war, a group of specialists conducting resource exploration flew over a vast desert region near a place called Al-Sahir. Below them stretched endless sand, no landmarks, no life. And that's why they noticed it immediately, a dark shape among the dunes. When they circled back, it was clear. It was a plane, a large bomber lying there as if it had crashed recently. But that was impossible. No reports of missing aircraft existed in that area. The coordinates were passed on, but the response was strange. Nothing was missing. Only later was a search team sent. When they reached the site, the first thing they felt was silence, a natural silence. The plane was split, but incredibly well preserved. The dry desert climate had almost frozen it in time. It looked like it had been there days, not years. Inside, strange details appeared. Weapons loaded, instruments partially working. The radio responded. There was liquid in a thermos that still smelled like coffee. But no crew, no bodies, no signs of struggle. Parachutes were missing, but supplies, water, food, equipment remained. This made no sense. The only clue was the name painted on the nose, Night Hope. Records revealed the truth. The plane was on its first mission. The crew was young. After takeoff, they flew into a storm. Others turned back. They didn't. They couldn't see the target and turned around. They dropped bombs to save fuel. Navigation failed. They got lost. They thought they were over the sea, but they were deep in the desert. When fuel ran out, they bailed out, believing they would land in water, but it was sand. In the morning, they realized the truth. Endless desert. No water, no hope. 8 survived the jump. 1 died immediately. They started walking, together, following the sun. Days passed. They collapsed one by one. 5 couldn't go on. 3 continued. But none survived. Search teams later found their path. They had gone the wrong way. If they had returned to the plane, they might have lived. But they didn't know, and it cost them everything. And that should have been the end. But it wasn't. Later, parts of the aircraft were reused. They were installed in other planes. And problems began. Failures, accidents, crashes. At first, it was blamed on mechanics. But a pattern emerged. All those aircraft had parts from Night Hope. Pilots reported hearing voices. Some felt like someone was in the cockpit. One saw a reflection behind him while flying alone. In museums, it didn't stop either. Guards heard footsteps. Motion sensors triggered. Figures appeared, walking, searching. And sometimes, it felt like they were trying to return from where they made their last mistake. And if you stand near those remains long enough, it feels like the story isn't over. After all this, the story of Night Hope kept growing. Unofficially, something never ended with that crash. Parts disappeared, some stored, some displayed, but the stories continued. One technician heard switches moving at night. Inside the cockpit, everything was off, but the smell of fuel filled the air. Another guard heard footsteps and whispers, multiple voices. He couldn't understand them, but he knew it was real. He refused to work alone again. More cases followed, different places, same details. Steps, lights, presence, voices. And one night, a radio crackled, a device that wasn't even powered. A voice came through. Base, respond. We've lost orientation. We can't see water.
Silence. Then, if anyone hears us, guide us home. Then nothing. The equipment was checked. It was dead. No explanation. But those who knew didn't need one. Maybe machines are just metal. Or maybe not. Maybe some moments never leave, and some flights never end, and somewhere they are still trying to find their way home.